What was the biggest mistake someone new at your job made? At my old job, this was called the perfect storm. I worked in a call center for an oil field. The foreman would call in oil. We'd type in the order number, create an order for the oil to be picked up by our trucks, and send it off to dispatch. The poor call center girl got the number off by 1 digit. So instead of picking up oil in the eastern part of our state, they picked it up in the western part of our state. Now, usually this wouldn't be a major issue, but this particular time, the oil that was supposed to be picked up was H2S. H2S oil is extremely poisonous. The foreman, knowing he'd done his job, left for the weekend. The H2S oil kept pumping, filled up to max, and spilled over the edge and onto the ground. This is where it gets expensive. The EPA has to come out and assess. We are fined for that, of course. There also happens to be a farmer who lives right next to the pump. His soil is tainted for the next 7 years. Not only do we have to pay fines, we have to pay this farmer for his crops that won't happen now. $15 million plus mistake. Because 1 digit was off.
It's wild how one small mistake can lead to such massive consequences. I remember a similar situation at my old job where a misplaced decimal cost the company a significant amount. Everyone always thinks their role is small, but it can really add up. Lessons like that stick with you, showing the importance of attention to detail. It's like how quickly things can spiral out of control over one simple error.
We had a 17-year-old kid come in to do some work experience at our engineering firm. That week, we also had a relatively new starter come into our team from another office hoping to move to the city. So our new starter asked the 17-year-old kid to do some photocopying prep for an important meeting he had that afternoon and desperately needs some drawings. The poor kid wasn't told what to do and ended up breaking the machine to the point we needed a call out to fix it. New guy lost his shit and started swearing at the poor kid, calling him a useless piece of shit. Everyone could hear across the office from the copy room. Our director overheard and came to investigate. It was the director's son on placement. The new had disappeared pretty quickly.
That's a rough situation. The new starter probably thought he was under pressure but overreacted. It's tough being new, especially when you're trying to impress. The poor kid didn't stand a chance with the machine. The director stepping in must have made things awkward. It's good that it ended quickly, but I bet that new guy regretted it afterward. Definitely a lesson on how to handle stress better.
They don't bother to train anyone they send to wash dishes at my work. They just throw them in the pit and tell them to do the job. Sometimes that leads to catastrophic "what the hell do I do" related failure. One thing that is never explained is that you were supposed to change the dishwater in your machine to keep the dishes actually coming out clean because the machine reuses the same water over and over. One line cook got sent into the pit on my day off. Never changed the water once. By 8 p.m. the white plates were coming out butter-colored and speckled with ash. Rather than figure out something was amiss and ask how to fix it, he instead took to wiping down each individual plate with a rag so that the slime wasn't as obvious. Then sent them out to have people eat food off of them. Health department would have had a conniption if they heard about that. I know I did.
That's wild. You can't just toss someone into a dirty dish pit without training them. The cook really thought wiping the plates would fix the problem. I can't believe he didn't stop to think it through. Just sending out plates like that is asking for trouble. I bet a few customers got a surprise on their dinner plates. Sounds like it could have ended badly if anyone noticed. People really don't think sometimes.
At the night shift at a small mental hospital, new guy wants to watch movies at the nurse's station's computers but can't under the hospital's OS. So he decides to try to install Linux. Fails and computer won't boot to anything. Doesn't tell anyone. He didn't get fired but wasn't allowed to go into a room where there was a computer, which was anywhere but a hallway. So he had to work night shifts completely in the hallways.
That's one way to start a job. He probably thought he was being clever trying to install Linux, but it backfired. Working night shifts in the hallways must have been pretty dull for him. I can imagine him just sitting there, No movies, just staring at the walls. At least it was a lesson on not messing with hospital computers, even if it was a pretty quiet consequence.
I work in IT. We had a guy around September of last year who vehemently refused to look anything up. He was a stubborn older guy who thought he knew it all. The CEO of one of our clients had an iMac in his office that wouldn't boot up at all. The new guy was sent in and immediately declared it FUBAR. The guy trusted his judgment and bought a whole new iMac. I don't remember the issue, but it was a 20-minute fix in safe mode when he brought the iMac back to our office. His excuse was, "I didn't think Macs could do that." We lost that client, and Dave got fired.
That's just rough. It's wild how one person's stubbornness can mess things up for everyone. I've seen similar situations where a simple fix turns into a big deal because someone didn't want to dig deeper. Losing a client over that must have been a tough lesson. At least now, everyone knows to double-check things before jumping to conclusions.
They stacked donuts on top of one another when heating them in this conveyor belt-type machine. The donuts and machine caught on fire. Edit. You guys crack me up? I work at a cinema, so burning things happens on the reg. Poor girl was not having a good day, though. She ended up covered head to toe in mango frozen yogurt later that night thanks to a faulty machine. Never laughed so hard in my life.
Sounds like quite a day at work. Stacking donuts was probably a bad idea from the start. Fires and faulty machines seem to be your routine. That poor girl must have been in shock with the yogurt mishap. Can't imagine the cleanup after that. Good to find some humor in it, though. It's these little moments that make work interesting, I guess.
A guy at work was told to go to the roof of a 4-story building, tie a rope grab to an anchor, and come back down. He took this literally and used the rope to slide down the building. He had no gloves on and proceeded to burn through his skin on his hands down to his bone as he held on for dear life.
That's a wild story. Can't believe he thought sliding down was the way to go. A simple climb back down could have saved him a lot of pain. Now he probably has a crazy story at work, but definitely not worth the injuries. Just goes to show how taking things too literally can lead to some serious trouble. Hope he learned his lesson.
He did a tire change and put the tires back on, but only tightened the lug nuts a few times by hand loosely. They're then supposed to be secured with a torque to whatever setting. But he forgot to do that, so the customer is driving down the highway when they finally come loose and the tires just fly off. Yeah.
That's a wild story. Imagine driving, and then suddenly your tires just decide to leave. I knew someone who didn't secure their bike tire right once. He ended up wiping out pretty bad. Proper checks can save you a lot of trouble. It's easy to overlook things in a rush, but it can lead to disaster. Just a reminder to always double-check your work.
I used to work as an assistant on night trains all over Europe. Fun student job, lots of tips. We were supposed to try and sell breakfast to our customers for a small commission. No one bothered about the commission, so not many were actually sold. We did get 2 breakfasts for ourselves, though, which we weren't supposed to sell, of course. Generally, what happened was that you would try to sell your own breakfast for the full price and grab some cheap food in a railway buffet. I recall a newbie on the job who was quick to learn and cleverly sold his breakfasts on his first ever trip. When we arrived back in Brussels, where we were based, one of the manager guys of the firm was greeting us and asked about the sales. "Sold some of those breakfasts?" he asked. Said the new kid, "Just my 2 personal ones, man. Never saw him again on my shifts."
That night train gig sounds chill. It's funny how the newbie picked up on the whole breakfast selling thing so quick. I guess when you're trying to make a little extra cash, you gotta do what you can. But being honest in that situation probably cost him the job. I hope he landed on his feet somewhere else. Can't help but wonder what happened to him after that.
I'm only in my second year of being a teacher, but last year, I witnessed a big mistake by someone who's been teaching for a really long time. This person had been teaching for nearly 30 years, but most of that time was spent as a music teacher. I don't know why they felt the need to make a jump into being an instructional teacher, but they did. One day, we were taking our students out to pee, and they were asking me how everything is going. I said that it's going fine, but I'm just having a tough time trying to fit in all the subjects and all the standards. The teacher says, "Do you know how I've saved a lot of time? I've stopped teaching reading." I laughed initially because I thought they were joking, but they were not. At one point, they decided that teaching reading wasn't worth it, so they had replaced that time with music time. I believe their students had the worst reading scores in our school, and their class was temporarily taken over by our school's reading coach. They're still employed.
That's kind of wild. I mean, just skipping a core subject like reading seems like a big deal. It's surprising how someone with so much experience would make that choice. I guess sometimes even seasoned teachers can lose sight of what's really important. The reading coach stepping in makes sense, though. It's interesting to think about how everyone's approach to teaching can really impact the student's learning. Sometimes you just have to stick to the basics.
I had a new guy ring me for some tech support. He didn't like the answer I gave him, so he gave me a mouthful of abuse and then slammed the phone down. We work for different departments in a global company. I don't know where I was located, but the 10 paces that took me straight to his desk must have been quite a shock.
That's a pretty interesting encounter. Sometimes people forget there's a real person on the other end of the line. It's surprising how quickly someone can turn aggressive when they don't get the help they want. I guess showing up unannounced adds a unique twist to the situation. It's good you stood your ground, though. Just goes to show that communication can really break down when emotions run high.
My dad works in a plant making diesel engines. A huge iron block is picked up by chains, brought to the next station, and brought down. My dad was at the next station. A lady, who my apologies was not new to the job, slipped the chains on the block, but neglected to properly bolt it on. Up it goes, over my father's head, and then down it goes. The minute the crank went up, she began to scream that it wasn't attached. My dad, as he likes to put it, reached back to the speed I had in 1979 and hustled out of the way, literally diving on a concrete floor to become clear of the massive iron engine block. It smashed to the ground. He escaped unscathed except for a hefty bruise on the shoulder from his impromptu dive. She was escorted off the floor, screaming, "I could have killed him," and was put on a 2-week suspension, and I think retrained.
That sounds intense. Your dad really had to think fast. Just imagine a heavy block crashing down, and he barely dodged it. It's wild how quickly things can go wrong at work. The lady definitely had to face some consequences for that. But at least your dad walked away with just a bruise. I guess it's a reminder of how careful we need to be in those kinds of environments.
First day working with a new construction crew, I was to meet my new supervisor at the local McDonald's to follow him out to the construction site. I arrived to find they'd hired 2 new guys, me and someone else. The boss pulls up in his truck and tells us both to follow him. Me and the other guy, each in our own vehicles, follow the boss through the parking lot to where we turn out onto the main road. Boss turns left. I turn left. New guy turns right and drives off the wrong way. We never saw or heard from him again. Cell phones don't work out in the mountains where we were, so you gotta meet people in person. No telling why that guy turned the wrong way, but sometimes I still wonder about that guy. Such a strange way to start your first day at a new job. Guess he didn't need the money as bad as me. Smiley face. Turns out to be the best construction crew I've ever been on. That guy has no idea what he missed.
It's interesting how sometimes first days can go off the rails. I remember my own first day at a job, where I ended up getting lost and missing the team lunch. I probably looked like a fool wandering around. But it turned out okay. I found my way, and the crew was cool. They showed me the ropes after that. That missing guy probably just wasn't ready for the job. Some people just don't stick around.
I used to work as a service station attendant, and there was a new guy at work who fell asleep at the counter. A larger woman customer stood at the counter and rapped on the counter. He got startled awake and exclaimed, "You fatty woman scared me." Needless to say, she complained big time to the boss.
That sounds like a rough first day for the new guy. I've seen people get caught off guard like that before. It's funny how the simplest moments can lead to awkward situations. I guess he learned a quick lesson about customer service. Hopefully, he got better at handling unexpected surprises after that.
Call center. We were all basically new as the place had opened within the past 6 months. He just started. Being such a new place, pretty much everyone knew everyone by name. It wasn't difficult. There were maybe 100 of us. So one day, new guy, me, and a few others were outside in the smoke area talking. For whatever reason, guy starts talking about why he was fired from his last job. Credit card /SS #theft. We were all glancing at him like he was the world's biggest idiot, and glancing over at the call center manager and his assistant, who were suddenly very tuned into our conversation. We all went inside. New guy stayed outside. Management also came inside. Within the hour, he was gone. He never made it back to the phones.
It's wild how a casual chat can turn into someone's last moment at a job. This new guy really didn't think things through. Everyone was curious, but sharing that kind of past? Not smart. The management was definitely listening. By the time we went inside, it felt like a setup. Just goes to show you that sometimes what seems like just another day can lead to someone getting fired. Unfortunate lesson for him.
Someone I know couldn't have been me. Worked in retail and accidentally put their register into training mode where it acts normal, but when you tender a transaction, no one's card actually gets charged. Tendered about 6 or 7 transactions like this. It cost thousands, and there were literally no repercussions. Except bosses told him not to do it again.
That's a pretty wild situation. I've heard of similar things happening in retail. One misplaced button press can lead to some serious chaos, especially with money involved. It's surprising that nothing really came of it, though. I guess some folks just get lucky. Kind of makes you wonder about all the little mistakes that go unnoticed in the hustle of daily work. Just a reminder to double-check everything, I guess.
I used to work outside at a swimming pool shop. Me and the new guy were filling jugs of chlorine before it was break time for me. Once my break was over, I came back to find a lake of chlorine had engulfed the yard. From what I remembered, it was 2,000 plus gallons of the stuff, at $9 per 5 gallons. You do the math. They fired him for it. The guy who got hired afterwards was always high. A week into his employment, he rammed the forklift onto a pallet of muriatic acid, spilling it across the yard. But he wasn't fired for that, no. The next day, he ended up smoking a joint inside the shop, in the bathroom. Bonus, I ended up back-ending my boss's Ford F-150 with a forklift. Really, it was just a bumper. I had to pay $500 via check deductions or get fired. Yup, I hate that job.
Sounds like a rough time at that job. First, the new guy spills a massive amount of chlorine and gets fired. Then, you get the guy who doesn't seem to care, and he just makes things worse. And then there's you with the forklift incident. It's wild how everything seemed to go wrong. The pay deductions must have been a real bummer too. Bet you were just counting down the days.
A guy went to training to be a bank teller. They learned how to open up family trusts. The trainer had them out Michael Jordan as an example for the beneficiary. It wasn't until 6 months later, after a customer noticed that he had entered Michael Jordan as one of the beneficiaries for every trust he opened.
That's a pretty funny story. I guess the guy just thought it was a good name to throw in there. It's interesting how careless mistakes like that can happen, especially when you're still learning. Can't Can't imagine the confusion it caused for the customers. At least he didn't put himself on the list. Just goes to show how important attention to detail is in those kinds of jobs.
Worked in a salon. We had one girl fill up a big sink with detergent and proceed to wash up our color bowls with the coffee cups. We ended up throwing away the coffee cups because we didn't want to accidentally poison a client. And before anyone asks, we had made it very clear to her that there were separate sinks for each and to not mix them up. Edit. The problem wasn't the detergent, which was a standard dishwashing detergent. The problem was the color bowls. Serving up coffee to people with potential traces of ammonia and hydrogen peroxide and various other chemicals is a bad idea. Edit 2. It wasn't my call to throw away the cups. Our boss said it had to be done, so be it.
That's a wild story. It's surprising how some people just don't get the basics. Mixing up equipment like that can lead to serious issues. I guess it's a good reminder to double-check what you're using, especially in a salon environment. At least it wasn't a personal mess-up, but still, losing those coffee cups probably stung. Hope everyone learned a lesson from it.
IT guy came into our office to configure a MacBook. He wasn't a Mac specialist. He also didn't know how Dropbox worked. He deleted the Dropbox folders from this Mac, and from all the other computers linked to it. He deleted all our agency's files, several gigs of them. We were nervous for a couple of hours, clients were nervous. Our boss called his boss. Another time, the same IT guy was waiting for an email confirmation about the importance of files on a computer. Didn't receive the email. Assumed that the files weren't important. Deleted a month's worth of web design without backing up. I'm amazed this guy is still working at that company.
It's wild how one person's mistake can ripple through an entire office. That IT guy really messed up big time. Deleting all those files must have put everyone on edge. It's surprising how he didn't seem to grasp the importance of backups or even basic file management. With mistakes like that, you'd think he'd be out the door pretty quick, but I guess some folks just stick around no matter what.
On a Friday, Christmas Eve, probably 15 years ago, all of us employees were off because it was a holiday. New accounting lady, first time entering direct deposit payroll, entered info incorrectly. Payday comes, and everyone in the whole company had their paycheck withdrawn from their account instead of deposited. Late morning and people are out Christmas shopping, and cards are being declined, and people's accounts are all jacked up. My auto insurance bounced. Luckily, my shopping was already done. The owner of the company called each employee, 20 or so people, and offered to give us cash to get us through until Monday if we needed it. They ended up paying each employee's NSF or any other fees. Accounting lady cried nonstop from that Friday through that Monday when she could fix everyone's account. My bank said it was actually some sort of illegal activity by the employer, and I could make a police report, but we were all close and I didn't want to go there.
That's a wild story. The chaos around Christmas just makes it worse. Everyone's trying to enjoy the holiday, and then their money disappears. The owner stepping in to offer cash really shows how important the team was to him. It's rough seeing someone mess up and feel that guilt, though. Glad you had your shopping done. Can't imagine how stressed that new accounting lady was throughout all of it.
I'm a valet. This kid I worked with hit one of the support pillars in the garage with the side of a car, scraped the entire side, flattened the fender, and ripped the tire apart. This was during an overnight shift, and instead of notifying someone, he just parked it in the garage and went about his business. He actually ended up getting fired for going up to a guest's room to fool around while on the clock, but yeah, he fucked that car up real good. Something like $20,000 in damages to a brand new Jeep Compass.
That's a wild story. Sounds like a rough night for that kid. I mean, hitting a pillar is bad enough, but to not say anything? That's a big mistake. Getting fired for fooling around on the job just adds to it. Can't imagine the shock when they found out about the car. A brand new Jeep, too. That's a tough lesson in being responsible at work.
New girl where I work retail, started freeloading within 2 months of being there. She hadn't even passed the 3-month probation yet. In case anyone doesn't know, freeloading is putting items in a customer's bag and intentionally not scanning them, so they get them for free. Apparently, she started doing it for family, then for friends, and then acquaintances, obviously thinking we couldn't track it. Sure turned around quick when the cops escorted her out one day.
That kind of thing happens sometimes in retail. You think people would be more careful, but I guess the temptation is strong. It's wild that she thought she could get away with it. It's strange how quickly trust can break down in a workplace. Probably made things tense for everyone else after that. Those situations just remind you to stay on your toes.
The new guy at my work ran a plate of regular pasta to a woman that had celiac disease and had ordered it gluten-free. She ate a decent amount of the pasta before her server saw what she was eating and snatched it off the table. The woman was understandably upset, and after talking to the manager for about 20 minutes, her stomach had swollen like 2 times its normal size. Dude wasn't fired, even though we go through an extensive 2-week training before being put on the floor on our own. He was later fired for falling asleep in the middle of taking an order at table.
That's a rough situation. It must have been pretty stressful for everyone involved. Celiac is serious, and I can see why the woman was upset. The new guy really dropped the ball there. It's wild that he managed to stick around after that incident, but then got let go for falling asleep. Guess it shows how important it is to stay alert at work.
This was someone in the same training group that I started the job with. I cruised through the training, and in my spare time, wrote a quick batch file to open up the most used programs at the start of the day. Then, feeling nice, I sent this out to the people in my training group. This particular guy somehow managed to open up hundreds of instances of each program and link in the batch file, because he claimed he didn't know where it was all going, straight to the taskbar, and kept running the batch file over and over and over. He ended up sitting at his computer doing nothing but running my batch file repeatedly for 2 hours, not taking any calls, until one of the supervisors went over to check on him. This is a tech support job, and yes, he is no longer here.
That sounds pretty wild. I remember when I started a new job, someone kept accidentally sending out company-wide emails. They didn't know what they were doing and flooded everyone's inbox for a bit. It was funny at first, but then the managers had to step in. You just never know how someone will handle a simple task. Some people are just not meant for tech support, I guess.
An intern engineer got caught forging a signature on a quality document. He didn't want to walk to another building to find the woman he needed to sign it. It turns out she was out on maternity leave. And then a principal design engineer sent out a final revision of a major design document. The intern then redlined the document and sent it back, covered in corrections. How he felt in his vast experience of 2 months, the document should have been constructed. He got fired pretty quickly.
It's pretty wild how some people think they can cut corners. This intern wanted to avoid a bit of effort and ended up forging a signature. Then, he thought it was a good idea to critique a major design document after such a short time. It seems he didn't grasp the importance of process and respect for others' work. Not surprising he got let go. Sometimes the shortcuts just don't pay off.
New IT staffer was setting up their own desktop PC, found some unrecognized files on the hard drive, and started deleting them. All of them. There were a lot of them. It took a long time. Oops, those weren't local files. That was the complete contents of the file server. How was an IT professional supposed to tell the difference between local and network drives?
It's funny how things can go wrong when you're just trying to set up. A friend of mine did something similar once, thinking he was cleaning up his own space. He ended up wiping out important files that everyone needed. It was a lesson learned about double-checking where you're clicking. Now we always joke about his data diet phase whenever we need an IT laugh.
A month into my new job, I gave the GM's personal number to a customer. His cell phone number. Right after I did it, I had a panic attack. The customer had bullied me for it, leaning over my desk and threatening me while his wife distracted other customers so they wouldn't see this 40-something man intimidating a 20-something receptionist. He did call the GM's phone. I got lucky because he bragged about how he had gotten the number from me. The GM flipped his shit and told the guy never to come back. He sat down with me for my side of the story later that week and told me what to do if something similar occurred. I'm still here 4 to 5 years later, but that will always stick with me. Thank God for my co-workers. One of the financial planners actually found the customer's number and reamed him out for his behavior. She was amazing. But yeah, don't give out the GM's cell phone number.
That sounds rough. It's strange how one mistake can stick with you for so long. It's good the GM had your back. Coworkers can make a huge difference too. That planner stepping in must have felt like a relief. Sometimes, people don't realize how their actions affect others. It's a lesson learned for sure. Glad you're still at the job and have a team you can count on.
Wanted to charge his iPhone, so he plugged it into a computer that was secured and not meant to have anything connected to it ever. Mistake on so many levels. Security took his phone and kept it for 6 months while it was forensically examined. During this entire time, he kept paying the bill for a phone he didn't actually have. Eventually, it was returned to him, and he was upset that all of the data on the phone had been wiped.
That's a classic tech blunder. It's wild how one small decision can spiral out of control. The whole situation was security, and the data wipe must have been frustrating. Paying for a phone you can't use for months is rough. I guess he learned the hard way about being cautious with devices. Hope he at least got a decent phone back after all that trouble.
They forgot to tighten the lug nuts for one of the customer's wheels. He only spun them on by hand. The customer got about a quarter mile away, and the wheel fell off. He came back with the police who had given him a ride. Part of my job description is performing damage control, but this time there was pretty much nothing I could do to calm him down. In the end, the shop paid for all his repairs and a new set of tires and wheels. Nearly $5,000 lost due to a stupid mistake. Pro tip: never hand tighten anything. If you're down there long enough to spin the nut on by hand, you're down there long enough to torque it down to specifications too. Spinning on a nut by hand is only meant for the first few turns, just to ensure the nut is threaded properly.
That's a rough situation. It's crazy how a small mistake can lead to big losses. I guess it shows the importance of doing things right the first time. I've seen similar stuff happen before, where people cut corners and end up paying for it later. It's a reminder that rushing can sometimes really cost you, both in time and money. Just sad that it had to happen to the customer.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.